Chapter 41, Interrogation. Sabrina saw how a disc headed straight for her stomach. When she wanted to attack with fire, she felt an invisible force that imprisoned her. It was as if an invisible hand had trapped her and would not let her move. Immobilization, thought Sabrina, closing her eyes. She knew Luke controlled this technique, so she had come prepared. She brought a ring that would protect her from the telekinetic waves. She didn't think she would have to use it for the defense of dozens of discs. The 10 kilograms disc hit her stomach with great force. She felt a lot of pain and almost threw up today's breakfast. Luke pulled the disc back, hitting Sabrina's stomach again. This time, the girl did vomit. An iron disc at high speed was no small thing. Besides, her body wasn't very strong, it was only better than a normie. She always relied on her 2 auras, not physical training. Are you okay? Asked Luke with a slight smile. Sabrina, who was kneeling on the floor, looked up and glared at him with hatred. Don't look at me like that. I went easy on you. I could have used all these discs and only used one, Luke added. You bastard, wait and see. Before Sabrina could follow through with her threat, a disc fell too close to her hand. The floor cracked. Know the situation you are in, Miss Spellman. Is your name Sabrina, or is it fake? Asked Luke. Before killing her, he had to do a quick interrogation. Even though he was at Nevermore and there would be some trouble or another murdering a student, Luke learned something in this time he lived in the outcast society. You could kill. If someone wanted to kill you, you were fully within your rights to kill them. So Luke could murder Sabrina as long as he proved Sabrina's intent to murder him. Yes. The only fake thing was my last name, Sabrina replied after watching as 10 discs were directed at her. Who else is with you? Asked Luke. It would be nice to know if there were any more killers in Nevermore. Just me, replied Sabrina, unable to believe herself in the situation she found herself in. She never thought she would be defeated by a boy who lived in a normie orphanage most of his life. How was he so powerful? It's a good thing they underestimated you and only sent a junior, said Edgar, who hovered near Luke. Why did you decide to attack me today? The hag's attack seemed like a more elaborate plan. You could have manipulated me with your red aura, asked Luke, confused. Although Sabrina's surprise attack was good and almost worked, it seemed like a very simple plan. Manipulate you with the red aura? Don't bullshit me. I tried to get close to you many times, and you always kept your distance. That way, it would be impossible to make you an emotional slave, Sabrina replied with a grimace. It looks like your horrible personality did some good, ha ha ha, Edgar said, laughing out loud. Luke frowned but said nothing. With Sabrina, he kept his distance since she hadn't appeared in the Wednesday series. That made Luke more distant. Not because he thought the girl was a killer or anything, but simply because he didn't trust her. With Enid and Xavier, on the other hand, it was different. He had seen them in the series and was able to know their personalities and histories beforehand, which made me trust them. You never leave this stupid school and your dorm. For you to go to the festival, I had to use the favor you owed me. That plan failed, and I got tired of waiting for you to do something different, so I decided to murder you for once. I'm tired of being in this shitty academy, Sabrina said, complaining with hatred in her tone. Her personality is very different from what everyone thinks, thought Luke. You don't like Nevermore? Asked Luke with a raised eyebrow. She's already insulted the academy twice. Of course not. Because of you, I had to come here and put up with the pro-normie ideals of this stupid school, replied Sabrina. My fault, thought Luke, debating whether to hit her with another 10 kilograms disc in the stomach. You were from another school? Which one? Asked Luke curiously. He knew that Sabrina wouldn't attend a normie school. Academy of the Dark Arts. It's much more efficient, and they don't force us to get along with normies. After all, they are inferior to us, Sabrina replied. A much more radical school, thought Luke. That's where the children of outcasts who hate normies attend. You'd fit right in there. I saw the video of how you crushed those students. You got punished for an idiotic thing. At my school, they wouldn't punish you. There are even duels of that intensity or more, said Sabrina. Too bad that because of the grudge in our families, we have to face each other, but if you let me go, I can convince my father to stop this fight. You have nothing to do with your ancestors, added Sabrina in a sweet and tempting tone. Shut up and just answer my questions, said Luke in a cold tone, hitting Sabrina's stomach again with a 10 kilograms disc. He knew she was using her red aura to manipulate him. He would not allow it. Cough, cough, coughed Sabrina, clutching her stomach and wincing in pain. All she wanted to do was set Luke on fire until he was ash. Ask her about her grandfather. If he's still alive, and if she has any siblings, Edgar said. Is your grandfather alive? Asked Luke. Sabrina hesitated to answer, but as she saw the discs floating closer and closer to her, she had no choice. No. He died all because of your father, replied Sabrina. My father, thought Luke in confusion. Your father was able to severely damage that geezer before he died, but I didn't know 100% if he managed to save himself or not. That's good news, explained Edgar. Do you have any siblings? Asked Luke. A brother a year older than me and, replied Sabrina with some hesitation. And what? Do you want another punch in the stomach? I could also read your memories and find out everything, but in the process, I might make your mind a little dysfunctional, said Luke with a slight smile. The part about reading memories was a lie. His ability wasn't that advanced. He still couldn't read a person's old memories. He could only read the person's current thoughts, and by looking at them very closely. Unpractical. His mind control ability was better. When he made eye contact with a person, he could mentally command them to stop. That way, he stopped Sabrina's attacks. All it took was a glance and a command. Although it only takes seconds, in a battle, it is very effective and puts the enemy in a dangerous situation. Sabrina swallowed hard at Luke's threat. She didn't want to be retarded, so she replied, a half-sister. Blood from my father and another woman. Age. The same as us. That's more than enough questioning, Edgar said. Just that? I want to know more about your family. About his father. If he has dealings with demons or what he did, Luke said mentally. She won't know anything about demons. She's just a junior. They won't give her such important information when she's still immature. I'll tell you. It's about time you knew. You have defeated the first Spellman, said Edgar. Well, Luke said. It had been long enough. He had to get this over with before someone wanted to stop him. Luckily, everyone was in the courtyard having a picturesque picnic. Luke looked menacingly at Sabrina and braced himself. He began to raise his arm and open his right hand, looking at Sabrina's white neck. What are you doing? You can't kill me. If you do, my father will show no mercy and come and kill you himself, Sabrina said in a trembling tone, crawling backward. The girl is right. Don't try to realize what you have in mind. Just erase her memories of this fight and create a new pair for her. So there won't be a void in her memory, Edgar said. That's it. I'm facing one of my archenemies, and I'm just going to erase her memory? I have the right to kill her. I have a serious wound, and the place was wrecked by the battle. I won't have any problems if I kill her, Luke asked reluctantly. If his daughter dies, they will be able to send stronger people to assassinate. Something is different. When your father attended Nevermore, they didn't send anyone to assassinate him, least of all from the family branch. For the time being, it's better if she remains the assassin after you. You will be able to train more for when the real powerhouses come. Use your head, and don't let your emotions control you. She's cannon fodder. You defeated her easily, even when she attacked you by surprise, Edgar said, and Luke nodded reluctantly. If I dislocate her arm and then heal it to perfection and her memories are erased, will she have memories of that pain? Asked Luke with an idea in mind, his eyes glowing with dark intent. Forgetting a torture is harder and will make erasing those memories 100% more laborious, but it is possible. If your cousin, Veronica, cures her, nothing will happen as long as you don't go overboard with the torture, Edgar said, one hand on his chin, assessing the situation. He knew what Luke wanted to do, and he wouldn't stop him. That's great, Luke said with a smile, glancing toward Sabrina. She felt a shiver run up and down her spine as she noticed his gaze. With a subtle wave of his hand, Luke used his telekinesis to force Sabrina's arm back. A choked scream escaped her lips as her arm dislocated with an ominous crunch. Sabrina tried to struggle, but was completely immobilized by Luke's power. When she tried to scream again, Luke closed her mouth with his telekinesis, silencing her. Only her stifled moans and groans could be heard. Hurts, whispered Luke in a cold voice, leaning closer to her. Sabrina could barely respond, her breathing was ragged, and her face was pearly with sweat. Don't worry, this won't last long, Luke continued. With a gesture, he began to bend her fingers one by one, slowly. Sabrina groaned in pain, each finger emitting a dry sound as it was forced into an unnatural position, her muffled cries echoing through the gym. That's enough, Edgar said after a while. Luke nodded and released his grip on Sabrina, who fell to the floor, shaking in pain. Her figure was pathetic. Not like always showing confidence and modesty bordering on arrogance. Sabrina was sobbing on the floor. She looked up at Luke. Her eyes, filled with tears, looked at him with extreme hatred. Luke showed no mercy. With a wave of his hand, he used his telekinesis to lift Sabrina against her will. She floated in the air, her limbs hanging limply as her body shook with pain and fear. It's pathetic, Luke muttered, his voice laden with contempt. She was only saved because of her family and because it wasn't in Luke's best interest to murder her. It was better to have someone pathetic behind you than Sabrina's father, the final boss. Without warning, he threw a punch with controlled speed and force. His fist struck Sabrina's temple with a dry impact. The blow caused her brain to jolt violently against her skull, knocking her unconscious on the spot. Sabrina's body fell to the ground with a thud, completely motionless. Luke sat on the ground near her, watching her limp form. The rage in his chest slowly subsided as he prepared to erase her memories. He took a deep breath, centering himself, and began to channel his psychic energy. Erasing a recent memory was something Luke learned in the last little while. If it was an older memory, he wouldn't be able to do it. Then, in the hole he erased, he would quickly put a false memory. The bad thing was that he only learned the theory. This would be his first case study. Edgar helped him, although he was not a blue aura psychic, he had seen this process several times, and it was very helpful. Chapter 42, Confusing. Come to the gym. Quick. Luke said. He sent a telepathic message. Sabrina lay on the floor unconscious. Luke erased her memory of the fight and the interrogation. He replaced it with a different memory where there was no attempted murder. This was because Luke was with someone else in the gym. In this memory he had Sabrina challenge him to a friendly duel, to try to find out Luke's strength, since she couldn't kill him. Luke accepted, and so the gym ended in these conditions. In the duel, due to a distraction, Sabrina was hit by a disc that hit her head and left her unconscious. As for the destroyed ring, it was damaged by a disc. It was the only thing he could think of. As Sabrina would not use the ring in this duel, it was feasible that it was destroyed by a random disc. According to Edgar, these artifacts are not indestructible. The door to the gym opened and in walked a girl with straight black hair, long eyelashes, amber eyes, and an upright posture showing her confidence. It was Veronica Umbrio. Veronica was the only Nevermore student who knew that Luke possessed 2 auras. He had told her himself. Mainly because of 2 things. First, he asked her for books on control, defense, and mind reading. It would be obvious that Luke wants these books to train his blue aura. Second, why did he ask Veronica for advice? She was also a psychic with a blue aura. She was from the Umbrio family. It was not an uncommon thing. Veronica looked with surprise and confusion at the state of the gym. There were cracked and burned parts of the floor and discs lying everywhere. What surprised her most was seeing a student unconscious on the floor and Luke sitting near her. What happened here? What did you do to that poor girl? Asked Veronica approaching Luke. What frightened her the most was seeing the state of Sabrina's arm and her fingers pointing in an unnatural position. Poor girl? This bitch tried to kill me. She's from the Spellman family. I guess you'd know something, said Luke, showing her the cut on his cheek. Luke quickly summed everything up for her. Veronica was supposed to play witness since that's the reason Sabrina didn't try to murder Luke and just wanted to have a friendly duel with him. Act nice or the video will come out, Luke said, finishing his summary of what happened here. They had to be quick. They didn't know when Sabrina would wake up. I understand, Veronica said, nodding her head. Then she walked over to Sabrina and healed her bones. Her healing ability was very good compared to Luke's companions who had green aura. She was on another level. Finished with Sabrina's treatment, Veronica steeled herself to Luke. What are you doing? Asked Luke, taking a step back. I'm going to dress your cheek wound. It would be strange for her to see a wound like that on your face. You were just supposed to have a friendly duel, Veronica replied. Fine, nodded Luke. He forgot that important part. Veronica placed her hands just inches away from Luke's wound. A greenish aura could be seen coming out of her palms. How much longer? Asked Luke after a minute passed. It was uncomfortable to have Veronica so close and staring at him. Don't talk. I need to concentrate. The cut is deep, Veronica replied. If it were her mother she could heal it in a few seconds, but she wasn't that advanced. In the past, Veronica wouldn't dare respond this way to Luke, since he has a very embarrassing video of her in his hands, and if she acts disobedient or rude it could make him angry with her. But she realized that her cousin is not as arrogant and ill-tempered a person as he appears. She had imagined that Luke would ask her for more difficult requests, but that wasn't the case. He would only ask her for books once in a while and ask her about some doubts about the blue aura. She realized that he only threatened her because she threatened him first. Otherwise, she would never have found herself in this situation, although she no longer saw it as a bad thing. There. Good as new, Veronica said after about 5 minutes. Luke touched his cheek and no longer felt any cuts. Thanks, Luke said, and Veronica's mouth dropped open in the shape of an O. She was surprised that Luke had thanked her. What's with that face? Asked Luke with little patience. He already imagined the answer she would give him. I didn't know you could say thanks. It's the first time you've done it and I gave you several books and some lessons, replied Veronica with a slight smile. Why does everyone think I'm someone ungrateful? Luke thought with some anger, though not that much. He was always grateful to the people who helped him. With Natasha when she gave him shelter and food, with Larissa, with Enid, with Xavier, and so on. 10 minutes later Sabrina regained recognition. Her head hurt, and she didn't understand what had happened. Luckily, the memories Luke implanted in her plus his and Veronica's testimony were enough to convince her that it had happened. Although she found it strange that she had lost the duel because of a distraction, from the memories she could tell that Luke was at level 2, something she had expected. It was good to have checked. If she had tried to assassinate him she could have easily done it with her current powers. Unfortunately, there was an annoying fly in the place. Another day, I'll assassinate him once and for all. He won't be as lucky as today, Sabrina thought. The only bad thing was that her protective ring was destroyed. She didn't think much of it. Her family was rich. She could ask her father for another one. Sabrina said goodbye and left the gym. She said she would take it upon herself to tell Principal Weems about the friendly duel and the minor inconveniences caused because of her fire. She showed a kind attitude very different from her real personality. It all worked out somehow, thought Luke, coming out of the gym. He already set up the discs. Now it's time to go back to his room and finally have Edgar tell him about the demons and the Spellmans. Are you okay? Asked Veronica, quickening her pace so Luke wouldn't leave her behind. You've already healed me. That was the only injury I had, Luke said quizzically at this question. That's not what I meant. I mean, they just tried to assassinate you, and you ran into a person belonging to the family that murdered your parents, explained Veronica. Veronica had a little information about her aunt's death. She knew that the Poes had an old grudge against the Spellmans. This was told to her by her father, but more than this she didn't know. I'm fine. I don't need your concern, Luke said with a grimace. You got me involved, Veronica said, angrily for some reason. I got you involved because I have a compromising video of you, not because I want your honest help. Relax, I won't force you to fight the Spellmans. That's a matter I'll take care of myself, Luke said. On second thought it's time for you to be free. I'll erase the video. You don't need to follow my orders anymore. What you did today is more than enough. We don't need to talk to each other anymore, Luke added with a dismissive wave of his hand. He felt that Veronica's help in this case had earned him her freedom. The girl would no longer feel fear that her social life might be over. Now that I'm of no use to you, you're getting rid of me? Asked Veronica in a loud, angry tone. She stopped and looked at Luke angrily. What? What is this girl saying? Luke thought in confusion as he stopped and looked at Veronica. Looks like I was the only idiot who thought our relationship had improved, Veronica said with glazed eyes. In these months, she thought her relationship with Luke had gotten closer. At first, she saw him as an arrogant guy, but by this time, she had grown to like him. They both had 2 auras, were both geniuses and were from families of major psychics. Okay, bye. I won't bother you anymore, said Veronica in pain, turning around and walking away from Luke. She was always the most popular girl, and everyone fell at her feet. Even Tommy, a talented werewolf from a good family. However, Luke was different. The more she got to know him, the more he captured her attention. The conversations they had when she was teaching him were very interesting, and she was already doing it for the fun of it. She didn't care about the video. She knew Luke wouldn't post it. He wasn't that kind of person. Luke watched Veronica's back move farther and farther away. He didn't understand what had just happened. He had told her that he would delete the video, and she would no longer have to give him lessons on the blue aura or bring him books from the Nightshade Society. It was a good thing, wasn't it? She should be happy. You still don't understand the heart of a young damsel, Edgar said, shaking his head. He witnessed the whole drama. He had already witnessed 2 dramas that day. What do you mean? Asked Luke. Usually, he would ignore his great-great-grandfather's taunts, but on this occasion he needed answers. That girl from way back has been helping you because she likes you, not because of the threat. Didn't you see her face when she was helping you study the blue aura? Replied Edgar. Luke remembered, and it could be that his great-great-grandfather was somewhat right. Veronica, when she helped him, didn't seem reluctant to do so. Usually, someone who is threatened would not have enthusiasm, but she did. You seem to have some charm to have caught her interest, Edgar added, stroking his mustache. We're cousins, said Luke with a grimace. So what? My wife was my cousin. Before you ask, psychics don't have inbreeding problems like normies. It's been proven. It's even more beneficial since you can carry on a specific aura of family, said Edgar. The birth of babies to parents who are siblings or close cousins is called inbreeding, and children who come from these unions are more likely to suffer from several genetic disorders, which can lead to various diseases. This would be the case for normies. In the outcast world, this problem did not exist. Luke made a barely audible sound and started walking toward his bedroom. He would not start a moral discussion about whether it was right or wrong to marry between cousins. He didn't care, and he didn't see Veronica that way. He already had a girlfriend. Chapter 43, Demons. Luke arrived at his bedroom. Xavier was not there. He was most likely still eating with Ajax's family. This was better for Luke, as he had to have a conversation with Edgar. Tell me about the demons, Luke said, sitting on his bed. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time, but Edgar didn't want to answer. Where to start, said Edgar, scratching his head. So far it is known of the existence of 2 planes, the earthly and the underworld. The earthly is where we live. The underworld plane is separate from the earthly one. What we know of this place is almost non-existent. We only know that in that plane there are powerful and malevolent supernatural beings. They only want to cause destruction and are pure evil. We call them demons, Edgar explained after a few minutes. Is the Bible real? Are there angels and an all-powerful God out there too? Asked Luke with a raised eyebrow. No. So far there are no records of benevolent beings towards humans. At least according to the knowledge I have, and it is quite a lot. This information is known to only a few people in the world, Edgar replied, shaking his head. The names they were given may be influenced by the Bible, but it has nothing to do with it. You just have to keep in mind that they are powerful and evil beings living in a different dimension than ours, added Edgar. How evil? Asked Luke. They just want to murder humans. The more, the better. They don't discriminate between normies and outcasts. For that reason even the most outlandish and ghoulish families of outcasts would never associate with demons, replied Edgar. I see. If they are from a different dimension, how can they get to kill humans? Asked Luke. Through satanic dealings. A contract between a human and a demon. Even normies can make these deals if they know how to make them. Why would a person make a deal with a being that irrationally hates humans and only wants to murder them? By power. In the case of outcasts, when completing the deal they get a strengthening of their aura. In the case of psychics or immortality, it depends on how powerful the demon is, Edgar replied. Whoa, you know a lot, said Luke, processing all the information. Of course, I hunted demons, or rather the bastards who made deals with demons, said Edgar, puffing out his chest proudly. Demon hunter, thought Luke with a strange expression on his face. All to increase power or gain immortality like the hag. I guess the odds of going insane aren't there, but there must be some downside, right? Said Luke. Not everything was rosy in the world. For such an increase in power, you should pay a high price. It was common sense. Exactly. The outcast will have a great increase in power. Even a psychic could get a new aura, but this is not free. All the contracts the demons make ask for only one thing, said Edgar, making a dramatic silence. What? Asked Luke impatiently. Souls. People who make deals with demons must provide them with the souls they crave. Until the end of time. The contract has no time limit and is not egalitarian. As you think, to get souls you must murder people, and the demons are not content with just one soul. They want hundreds of thousands. The hunger of these beings knows no bounds, Edgar said in a serious tone. That's why they are the enemies of all outcasts, nodded Luke. The demons only wanted to cause chaos and destruction. The more humans they killed, the better. Yes. Even extremists who hate normies dare not make deals with demons. Few are the bold ones who dare to make them, and if caught they will be hunted down by the elite outcast families, said Edgar. So why are the Spellmans still alive and kicking? Asked Luke. If Edgar was a demon hunter when he was alive, he just had to tell the world that the Spellmans made deals with demons and would become the enemy of the world. Old outcast families like the Spellmans have a great reputation. Usually, those who make deals with demons are not those kinds of old, established families. However, the Spellmans did it, and the Poe family found out about it, but we couldn't produce the evidence in time to validate that they made deals with demons. Those bastards are very good at hiding everything, Edgar replied. How did the Poe family realize the Spellmans made deals with demons? Asked Luke, curious. My wife Virginia died in 1847, said Poe with a sad expression. A year later my relationship with Elmira Spellman improved. We knew each other from before we were co-workers. He added with a nostalgic look. Flashback. Maryland, Baltimore, USA. On a narrow cobblestone street stood an old red brick house. The front of the house showed signs of the passage of time, with wooden windows framed by worn moldings and a carved wooden front door with ornate, though now somewhat faded, detailing. Inside the house was a modest space, cleanliness was non-existent. At a simple wooden table sat two people staring at each other, a man and a woman. Would you like some tea or something? The man asked in a tired tone. His hair was tousled black. He had a mustache and his eyes were devoid of life. His name was Edgar Allan Poe, a powerful psychic who was very famous in the outcast community. In the normie community, he had made a name for himself with his tales of terror, but as yet he had not achieved worldwide fame. The woman with pale blonde hair and grey eyes watched the man in front of her. She couldn't recognize the powerful psychic with the depressing man in front of her. It's been almost a year since you disappeared. When do you plan to return? The woman asked. Her name was Elmira Spellman. I'm not going back to Boston. My brother already tried to convince me. I won't, Edgar said. His mood would depress a normal person just looking at him. I got information that there is a crazy cannibal outcast in Texas. He defeated and almost killed 2 members of the order. His increase in power may be due to demons, said Elmira. I was asked to help. Will you come with me? She added, looking hopefully at Edgar. She couldn't bear to see him like this. No, I'm tired of fighting those bastards. It's most likely some idiot who did dark magic, Edgar refused. You need to get over Virginia's death. Your family depends on you, said Elmira with concern. My brother is more than capable of running the Poe family. He has heirs to spare with all the wives he has. If you'll excuse me, I have things to do, Edgar said with a frown. At the sound of Virginia's name, he felt a stabbing pain in his chest. Elmira had no choice but to say goodbye to Edgar. She had a mission, but once it was over she would return. She would not let Edgar rot in a depressive pit. She had known him for over 20 years and loved him too much to see him like this. 10 days later, Elmira returned. Any free time she had was spent at Edgar's house keeping him company. She cleaned the house, cooked so Edgar would stop eating junk food, and talked as much as possible. In this way a year passed. Is she still not coming? Thought Edgar, looking at the door of his house. It had already been a week since Elmira went on a mission given for the order, most likely to look for clues from demons that usually led to nothing. They were crazy outcasts performing dark magic and killing normies by their own choice. Edgar's appearance was different from a year ago. His hair was combed and tidy. His eyes had regained sparkle, and he no longer had a depressive aura about him. All this thanks to one woman, Elmira. His ears picked up footsteps approaching his door. He quickly got up and opened the door. A smile formed on his face as he saw that it was Elmira who was about to knock. Edgar, don't scare me like that, said Elmira, putting a hand on her chest. I'm sorry. Come in, said Edgar with a slight smile, taking the woman by the hand. What a gentleman. A year ago you barely opened the door for me and you were always looking at me with an annoyed face, Elmira said with a smile. I'm sorry for showing you that part of me, said Edgar, embarrassed. I'm just kidding, it's nothing, said Elmira with a chuckle and sat back in the chair. What happened to your shoulder? Asked Edgar, concerned. He could see that Elmira's shoulder was completely bandaged. A little mishap. You know, in our work we always put ourselves in danger. It's normal, said Elmira without further explanation. Edgar nodded and asked, a tea? Yes, please, Elmira replied. She was happy that Edgar had slowly been able to leave his depressed state. How is your story going? Asked Elmira after Edgar had poured her tea. Better than ever. I'll have it finished in no time. It will be a great success. I can feel it, said Edgar confidently. I'm glad to hear that, said Elmira with a smile. How long will you be staying? There are many new activities we can do in Baltimore, said Edgar enthusiastically. Only 3 days, replied Elmira reluctantly. So little? Well, work is work, thought Edgar. He gave up everything and lived on the Poe family's money. His stories and tales were not very profitable these days. Would you like me to join you? Asked Edgar. He wouldn't mind resuming his demon hunting activities if he could be with Elmira. No need. You have to write your story. You can't get distracted, said Elmira, refusing with a smile. Over the next 3 days, Elmira and Edgar did many activities together and spent their time happily until Elmira left for her mission. 15 days passed, and there was no sign of Elmira. Edgar was getting more and more impatient. Usually, missions take at most 10 days, and if it takes that long Elmira sends him a letter. But so far, he has not received any letter. When he was about to go out to look for her, he received a letter from her. He thought she would tell him that she was delayed for something and it would arrive in a few days, but it wasn't so. In the letter, there was only an address. He recognized Elmira's handwriting. He knew this was not good. Chapter 44, Farewell. Richmond, Kentucky. Edgar muttered, pocketing the letter. He walked out of his house and looked at the sky. It was cloudy. His body lifted off the ground and began to rise higher and higher. When he was a considerable distance from the ground, he began to fly at a great speed heading for Kentucky. The flying skill was among the most difficult for yellow aura psychics to master. He had about 900 kilometers to travel until he reached his destination and met Elmira. Edgar's speed in the sky was very ragged. It exceeded 200 kilometers per hour. After about 4 hours, he reached his destination. He did not stop for a moment. He looked at the town from the sky and landed in a lonely area. He didn't want a normie to have a scare to death. Richmond is a city located in Madison County. It was just beginning to develop for quite some time. Its population was as high as 10,000. Edgar walked along watching the normies coming and going. He walked until he came to a deserted street and stopped in front of what appeared to be an abandoned blacksmith shop. It's here, thought Edgar, probing the place. He was able to find Elmira's aura inside this abandoned workshop. This is thanks to his clairvoyance ability. In the letter, it only said the name of the town and the county of Kentucky, so he had to look for her himself. He knew when he received a letter from Elmira with only one location that something in her mission had gone wrong, and she needed reinforcements. He worked with her for many years, and it wasn't the first time they had used this method to make their location known. Edgar entered the place through a dilapidated sheet metal door. Everything was dark, dusty, and cobwebby. When he took a few steps, he felt a knife at his neck. Don't move, said a voice he recognized. It's me, Elmira, said Edgar nonchalantly. He had already noticed the movement with his extrasensory ability. Phew, you finally got here, said Elmira, dropping the knife and sitting on the floor leaning her back against a box. Edgar turned around, and his eyes widened as he saw Elmira's condition. She had wounds and burns all over. The worst was a deep wound in her stomach that was bleeding heavily. What happened to you? Asked Edgar with concern and growing anger. He would find the bastard who did this to Elmira and beat him to a pulp. My brothers, Edward and Eldon, Elmira replied with a wince. Edgar's worried and angry expression turned to confusion. What did you say? I guess I didn't hear right, he said, cleaning his ears. You heard right. My brothers left me in this condition, rectified Elmira. Impossible? Why would they hurt you? Asked Edgar in disbelief. He knew that both brothers got along very well with Elmira. They were even overprotective of her. Listen to me, Edgar. We don't have time. My brothers made deals with demons. At this time, I collected evidence, but they caught me. They wanted me to join them, but I refused them. That's why I am in this state, and they are hunting me, said Elmira in a serious tone. Edward and Elton made deals with demons, thought Edgar with a shocked expression. He knew both brothers very well. He fought side by side, hunting the bold ones who wanted to make deals with demons. They were not that kind of people. I know it's hard to believe. Here. This scroll. You must protect the scroll and head to the address there. I managed to save the evidence. You must retrieve it, said Elmira, passing an old scroll to Edgar, who was still processing all the information. Before he could say anything else, the entrance to the smithy exploded. The fire began to spread through the place. Edgar protected Elmira. With his telekinesis, he easily stopped all the debris heading towards them. Oh, Edgar, you're here. That makes things difficult, said a middle-aged man walking through the fire. The man was blonde and had a neat bar across his face and an icy stare. He had the same gray eyes as Elmira. Looks like you got over your depression? Congratulations, said a jet-haired man walking beside the blonde man. Unlike the blonde man, this man had a more relaxed and not so serious appearance. Edgar, Eldon, said Edgar, looking at both men he considered his friends and co-workers. Give me an explanation or I will crush you, said Edgar with an angry look on his face. The air around him began to tighten, and an enormous pressure permeated the whole place in flames. The walls of the smithy shook, and it seemed that at any moment they would collapse. Both Eldon and Edward felt an enormous pressure on them. Breathing was more difficult, and staying upright was difficult. Your telekinesis is powerful as always, said Eldon with a smile. A large amount of fire enveloped him and protected him from Edgar's immense pressure. No explanation is needed. Looks like Elmira already told you, said Edward. A translucent barrier protected him from the enormous pressure. You bastard! You made a deal with the demons? Why, shouted Edgar, and a shockwave completely destroyed the smithy. Hey, take it easy, dude. You're attracting the attention of the normies, said Eldon, escaping from being buried by the rubble. Sorry. Are you okay? Said Edgar, who grabbed Elmira and saved her from being buried. Her injuries barely allowed her to move. Yes, replied Elmira. Why? It's simple. The normies. That's the answer, answered Edward, who was still impeccable. His clothes were not soiled by even a speck of dirt or dust. Their wars continue to spread, and their arrogance knows no bounds. As superior beings we must stop them, added Edward with a serene and determined look. Being superior? Put aside your stupid god complex, Edgar said with a grimace. If you want to exterminate them, do it with your powers, but you've made deals with demons. I can't let that go. The demons will sooner or later force you to hunt outcasts, and you will endanger our society, added Edgar, as his aura increased. Edgar already verified that Elmira's words were real. Not only by Edward's words. He could see with his clairvoyance the aura of Edward and Elton. He noticed that they were not the same as before and had demonic energies. Your confidence is admirable. Do you think I'm the same as before? I won't lose to you again, Edward said with a cold stare. The air around him began to drop, and beneath his feet, the ground froze. Let's see how much your powers increased with those stupid demons, said Edgar, preparing to fight. He knew his death was coming, but he would take at least one of them with him. You can't? You must flee. I will distract them. It's up to you to stop them in the future, exclaimed Elmira. No, I will stop them. You will come back alive. Here, said Edgar, passing the parchment back to her. Besides that, he pulled a small book out of one of his pockets. What is this? Asked Elmira. A teleporter. Courtesy of my brother. It will send you to Boston. Near the Poe mansion, replied Edgar. When he was sinking into his depression, his brother visited him and gave him this teleporter for when he decides to return home. Elton, who heard this, was about to jump in, but Edward stopped him and shook his head. Edgar's clairvoyance was very advanced. He could predict their movements, dodge them, and the attack would be useless. His sister already had the teleporter in her hands. Her life was guaranteed. Edgar's, however, was not. I'm not leaving you here, said Elmira. Listen, Elmira. Thanks to you, I regained hope. It took me a long time, and you had to put up with me for so long in that deplorable state. In this time I realized that I love you. That's why I won't let you fight to the death with your family. Goodbye, Elmira, said Edgar, snapping his fingers. No, Edgar dashed before Elmira could extend her hand towards Edgar. A blue light came out of the book she was holding and disappeared. Unfortunately, the teleporters only could carry a single person. Otherwise, Edgar would have fled. As a clairvoyant, he knew firsthand the current strength of both brothers. In the past, he would not be afraid, but now he knew that his life would most likely end here. In ancient times, the normies sought the protection of the more powerful outcasts so they would not die at the hands of the wild beasts. Thanks to that they survived, began Edward in a solemn tone. Here we go with the villain monologue, thought Edgar, wiping his ear. However, as soon as they were able to survive on their own, they bit the hand of the one who fed them. Witch hunting, discrimination, and annihilation towards our kind. Goody Adams is a good example of that. Do we have to hide while we watch them produce ever more dangerous weapons? Asked Edward, clenching his fist. I understand your point. What I don't get is why you brought the demons into this. They don't care about outcasts or normies. They just want souls. Even our souls are tastier to them, Edgar said. My power is not enough to exterminate them. Their numbers already number over 5 million in the United States alone, said Edward helplessly. Once I complete my mission, I will commit suicide. That way, the demon won't be able to control me anymore, he added with determination. Once you made a contract with a demon, it was for life. You could not cancel it. If you did not obey the demon, you could be tortured for life by him and become crazier than a hag. In the process, you will kill a lot of outcasts. I will not allow that, Edgar said with a frown. Around him, a large amount of metal began to float. Both were seeking the protection of the outcast society. One was willing to make sacrifices if that was what was necessary to exterminate the normies. The other would not allow the slaughter of innocent outcasts. Edward's arms froze, and more the coldness permeated around him. By contrast, Elton's arms had turned to fire. The fight between America's most powerful outcasts was about to begin, and its consequences would be catastrophic. Chapter 45, Two Stubborn People. That's it? How was the fight? Asked Luke, who was really hooked on the story of Edgar's epic death. Our fight lasted a couple of hours. If I have to recount it, it will take too long. I died in the town of Richmond that day, but I managed to assassinate Elton, said Edgar lazily recounting the whole fight. He managed to kill one, thought Luke, looking respectfully at his great-great-grandfather. He faced two psychics who had their powers augmented by demons. Still, he was able to take one to his grave. Wait, Richmond? That name rings a bell, Luke thought, starting to rummage through his memory. Thanks to his photographic memory, it didn't take him 10 seconds to find the answer. Your fight destroyed Richmond, Kentucky? Asked Luke in surprise. In normie school, he had studied in his history class about this disaster which for normies had been caused by nature. Overnight the town of 10,000 people was completely destroyed. More than 85% of the inhabitants died, and not a single building was left standing. Public opinion accepted that it was an earthquake or something like that. Yes. Unfortunately, many innocent normies died. Edward and Elton's fire and ice power was mighty. I couldn't contain myself and used my telekinesis to the fullest, Edgar replied regretfully. Jericho has the same inhabitants, thought Luke, surprised by the degree of destruction. Luke thought the level of power in Wednesday's world was no big deal. In the series, the fight to the death between Wednesday and Crackstone was no big deal. The school wasn't even destroyed. If a person with Edgar's power were to go into a city and no one had the power to stop him, he could create a huge massacre. Normies' weapons are not efficient against the power of a telekinetic like Edgar in the past. In your story, there seemed to be an organization that was in charge of eliminating demons or looking for information about people who may be in contact with them. So it sounds like it's a big crime if you make deals with them, Luke said, and Edgar nodded. If that's the case, all we have to do is get proof that the Spellmans are in contact with demons. That way the whole outcast society will turn against the Spellmans, Luke added. If they pull this off, Luke won't be at a disadvantage and won't have to go up against a family hundreds of years old with wealth, numbers, and power alone. Easier said than done. When Elmira arrived at Poe Manor, she explained the situation to my brother. They tried to retrieve the evidence Elmira hid but were intercepted by the Spellmans. From that failure Poe's downfall began, Edgar said, gnashing his teeth. The Spellman family has a lot of power within the outcast society. Their hands reach everywhere. For everyone to turn against them we need truthful evidence. The Spellmans took it upon themselves to destroy the evidence that Elmira had collected, he added, shaking his head. So you want me to take them out by myself? Asked Luke with a grimace. The Poe family in their splendor could not accomplish that task. It would be unrealistic for Luke alone to eradicate the Spellmans. While he was very confident in his skills and talent, he was not an arrogant idiot. He could take on a Hyde or Crackstone, but this was already another level. Of course not. That task is nearly impossible. Do you think I asked your father and other ancestors to send themselves headlong against an invincible boss? The approach must be different. We must collect evidence. That way, the other ancient outcast families, whether they be psychics, werewolves, or vampires, will decide to attack the Spellmans, Edgar replied. Of course, in addition to that, you must kill Edward and as many members of the Spellmans as possible, he added with a ghoulish grin. I understand. If Edward made a deal with a demon so many years ago, he must have collected many souls of normies and even outcasts. Don't the others realize that? Asked Luke. Since Edgar's fight against the two Spellman brothers, more than 100 years have passed. How many souls must Edward have collected? He must have many massacres on his hands by now. True, but there's a problem. Edward doesn't act directly. He usually manipulates outcasts to do his soul-collecting work. That way it's very difficult for him to get caught. For example, he can control an insane witch to slaughter many normies and collect the souls he needs, Edgar explained. Your parents, besides saving you, did not die in vain. The evidence they collected is not as good as Elmira's, but it will save you a lot of time. Natasha must be taking care of finding that evidence. You just have to keep training, he added, and Luke nodded reluctantly. He wanted to have real fights to the death, though of course not against Edward Spellman or it would be the end of his short life. Didn't anyone in the outcast society do anything while two ancient families of psychics were at war? Asked Luke doubtfully. Although he knew it was a grudge that was believed to be personal, and they didn't know there were demons, it would be strange if no one would pry. Especially, when Edgar was considered the most powerful psychic of his time and the Poe family was in its golden age. No, you must understand that the outcast society has different customs and laws. No matter how much two ancient families conflict, no one will interfere. It doesn't matter if it's over a stupid grudge or a minor conflict. They will only meddle if there are demons involved or if they involve innocent third parties in their fight, Edgar replied. I understand. By the way, why didn't Natasha ever give me the necklace where you were resting? That way, I could have started training properly much earlier, asked Luke. He always had this doubt in his mind, and now that Edgar was answering everything it was time to ask. Do you think the necklace is an old family heirloom? Asked Edgar with an amused smile that pissed Luke off. Yes, what else? It's just an old necklace of no value. When I accompanied your father it was inside a ring. My powerful soul and the Poe blood, which continues in you, is what keeps me in this world as a ghost, but mostly the Poe blood. If the bloodline ends my soul will dissipate in a short time. I must rest, and the best rest for ghosts are old objects like this necklace. When your father was about to die I had to find a new object in which you could find me, so I went to the Poe mansion in Boston. Natasha had no way of knowing which object it was on, Edgar explained patiently. Blood has a lot of importance in this world, thought Luke, remembering that Goody Adams had also told Wednesday that her blood was the key. I understand. How did you know I'd grab that necklace? You could have been stuck in that necklace forever, Luke commented. I gambled, and it was only logical that you would at some point visit your future home. As for Natasha, her mission was to keep you hidden, so that you wouldn't be found, or rather that they wouldn't think there was an heir left alive, Edgar replied, and Luke nodded. Lots of information. I'll go to sleep, Luke said wearily. It wasn't dark yet, but a lot of exhausting things happened on that day. He fought Enid verbally, fought Sabrina Spellman to the death, and learned about his family history. The next day's classes were uncomfortable for Luke. He usually hung out with Enid, but with the previous day's fight, the two ignored each other. Enid's gaze landed on Luke several times, but she decided to stay away. She was angry, and although the last thing she said to him could be misinterpreted, she was still upset about Luke's attitude towards her mother. As for Luke, he had no plans to talk to Enid either. He felt no guilt. Enid's father and siblings had had a great time, so why should he be to blame if her crazy mother got mad over some stupid jokes? They were both very stubborn and would not back down. It was a fight of attrition. The first one to get close to the other would lose. In this way, the days went by. Luke and Enid didn't speak to each other and continued to ignore each other. What's wrong with you? You look sad, said Yoko, who was having breakfast together with Enid and Divina in the cafeteria. Nothing. I just remembered that Luke loves apples, and I always peel them for him, said Enid in a depressed voice, looking at the apple on Divina's plate. Yoko and Divina looked at each other and sighed slightly. They were already aware of Enid's fight with Luke. These days Enid was glued to them, and that was weird since she was always with Luke. I should have picked a banana, Divine muttered. Can't he peel an apple? Asked Yoko with a raised eyebrow. No, he's very clumsy. He always ends up making a mess, said Enid with a smile, remembering Luke trying to peel an apple. Look at the expression you get when you talk about him, thought Yoko with a roll of her eyes. Although she didn't entirely like her best friend's boyfriend, she couldn't deny that Enid was very happy with him. So, if Enid is happy, is she? Stop behaving like 10-year-old kids and sort yourselves out. It's your first fight, and it looks like it's the end of the world, said Yoko forcefully. I'm not talking to him, said Enid, stubbornly crossing her arms. Then stop bringing it up every 10 seconds, Yoko muttered irritably. They couldn't talk about any subject, as Enid always related it to Luke or something she did with him. Ugh. I miss him so much, muttered Enid, leaning her head on the table and looking towards Luke, who was eating breakfast next to Xavier and Ajax. At the other table. I'm getting tired of seeing your depressed face, said Xavier as he took a bite of his toast. I'm not depressed. My face is the same as always, Luke growled. Still not talking to you with Enid? Asked Ajax, and Luke nodded. Ajax was Sabrina's boyfriend. That is, of the person who tried to kill him, but Luke didn't care. It was better that his assassin was Sabrina since he could defeat her. It had been a week since he stopped talking to Enid. At first, he thought he would have no trouble ignoring her, but he was very wrong. He thought that by not having to put up with Enid's enthusiasm in the mornings, he would be better off, but that wasn't the case. Do I miss her? Thought Luke in confusion. He never thought his mood could drop so low just by not talking to Enid. Just be a man and talk to her. I always do with Bianca, and look at me, here I am, Xavier said with little patience. He could no longer stand Luke being around all day like he had no soul. He couldn't play video games, and at the archery club, everyone noticed Luke's performance was down these days. This is the 21st century. Relationships should have gender equality. Why does the man always have to come forward to apologize, said Luke, who had no plans to talk to Enid no matter how much he missed her. Whatever, said Xavier, knowing Luke's stubbornness knew no bounds. Peel this apple for me, said Luke, passing a red apple to Xavier. You do it, said Xavier. He didn't feel like it, and he wasn't good at peeling apples either. TSCH, that's mean, said Luke with a grimace. I kind of miss her, thought Luke, looking slyly towards Enid, who was sitting with Yoko and Divina. Chapter 46, Reconciliation. Why aren't they here yet? Thought Luke in annoyance. He was currently on the rooftop waiting for Xavier and Ajax. For some unknown reason, they had summoned him here. Since he had nothing to do and had gotten into a fight with Enid, he decided to come. Luke leaned against the railing and surveyed the Nevermore landscape. It had been over 7 months since he had arrived here. They had tried to murder him twice, but it was a better place than he had originally thought. He already knew who his assassin was. Luke wanted to know beforehand how Sabrina would try to assassinate him, but he still couldn't practically read minds. So, he had to keep training on his blue aura. Also, before reading Sabrina's mind, he must take her somewhere alone and knock her out. Then, he will have to create new memories and erase the others. It is a very complex issue. I wonder what Enid is doing, Luke thought. This feeling of homesickness didn't please him, but he couldn't control it. He never thought that someone so lonely could get to miss a person. Just then the door opened. Luke turned around. He thought he would meet the silhouette of his 2 friends, but he did not. The person who walked in was Enid. The person he was thinking about just seconds ago. Enid was surprised to see Luke. She quickly turned and wanted to open the door again to escape, but it had been locked. Open up, Yoko, said Enid, making more force in her grip about to break the lock. Don't break school property or the principal will punish you, said Yoko from the other side with a mischievous smile. Enid, hearing this, stopped her strength. It would be bad to break the door. She doesn't want to be punished. Luke, fix your problems with your girlfriend, exclaimed Xavier from the other side of the door. See you, Luke. We'll play a game later, said Ajax, who was also on the other side along with Xavier, Yoko, and Divina. These guys, thought Luke with a frown and approached the door. He heard the footsteps of the others leaving the place. He was trapped next to Enid. Although he could open the door with his current telekinesis, he would play dumb. Should I break the lock? Asked Luke, playing dumb as if he couldn't open the door without breaking the lock. No. It's bad to break school property, said Enid, walking away from Luke and sitting on the floor against a wall. Luke followed her and sat at a distance neither near nor far. What do you want? Asked Enid, trying to sound as nonchalant as possible. Didn't you hear them? They seem to want us to get fixed up. That way they'll open the door for us, replied Luke. Sooner or later, they'll open it for us, said Enid as if she didn't care. Do you want to stand here for hours in silence? Asked Luke with a raised eyebrow. I don't care, replied Enid dryly. However, in reality she did want to be here for hours, since she would be with Luke, and it had been a long time, only a week, since they had been together. You sure are stubborn, Luke commented. You're more so, said Enid. No, you surpass me. I doubt it. I've never seen you accept a mistake of yours, Enid said, and Luke frowned. It might not be that far from the truth. As for Enid's mother's case, it could be that he was a little over the top with the jokes. especially when Enid before Parents' Day had told him what her mother was like. He could have tried to be a little more respectful and kept the jokes to himself. This he had noticed, and in a normal case he would have approached Enid apologizing, although this does not detract from the fact that it would have been a very difficult task for Luke, as his pride is too high. He did not do it for another reason. The Spellmans. The Spellman's daughter tried to murder him at school. In the future Enid could become another target to kill as she is his girlfriend. These days he is debating whether or not to end his relationship with Enid. That way, he would make her safe for the future. His father became his mother Sophie's boyfriend at Nevermore. Sophie died because of the Spellmans. Not only that, the Umbrio family did not accept that Sophie was with John, as they knew of the grudge between the Poe family and the Spellman family. They didn't want to get involved, and even more so when their daughter was joining the losing side. He doesn't know if Enid's family will be aware of this, but as soon as they find out the same story will be repeated. "I'm sorry," said Luke after thinking about all these things. "What did you say?" asked Enid in surprise, looking at Luke for the first time. She had heard it clearly but wanted to hear it again. "Don't make me repeat myself," Luke replied. It was the first time he had ever apologized honestly in his life. "Come on, please." "I didn't get to hear," insisted Enid, moving closer to Luke, who turned to look at her. After many days, he could see her face so close to him again. "I said I'm sorry," repeated Luke, looking at Enid. "Apology accepted," said Enid with a bright smile. "I'm sorry too, for the last thing I said. I didn't mean what you thought," Enid added worriedly. "Yeah, I know. Don't worry," Luke said, kissing Enid suddenly. It had been a long time since he had felt her lips. Enid was surprised by the sudden kiss. She closed her eyes forgetting the stupid argument she had with Luke, and enjoyed the moment. After a few seconds, Luke pulled away from Enid and opened his eyes. "Why did you stop?" asked Enid, dissatisfied. It had been a long time since she had kissed Luke. "I have to tell you something," said Luke. "Oh, what is it?" asked Enid, curious. Luke told her that he possessed a blue aura. That is to say that he had mental powers like telepathy. To create a telepathic link with her, they would be able to communicate all the time, and if Enid needed help with anything, he would know right away, as Enid would be able to ask him for help almost instantly. During this time that he trained his blue aura, he got his mental link to have a new function. In addition to allowing mental communication, one is aware of the existence of the other. If the connection disappears it means that the person is unconscious or dead. In this way, he will be able to protect Enid in case something happens. He will be selfish and will not take the path of separation. "Double aura? That's fantastic," said Enid with great enthusiasm and a big smile. "You're not angry?" asked Luke, as he hid it from her for many months. "Not at all. I'm just happy you told me your secret." "I'm the first, right?" said Enid, giving for the fact that she was the first person to know that Luke had two auras. "Well," said Luke as he told her that Veronica was the first person to find out. He explained to her the reason for this. He needed Veronica's help as she had the books he needed to train his blue aura. Also, the Umbrio family specialized in that aura. Enid was not angry about this. She understood Luke's point and wasn't planning to start another stupid argument. "Create a link with me. We can talk anytime and instantly, much faster than a cell phone and without anyone knowing. Even in class," said Enid with great enthusiasm. "I did the right thing, didn't I?" thought Luke, creating a telepathic link with Enid. Minutes passed as Luke and Enid conversed telepathically. Enid talked more than usual and had a lot of things to tell Luke since they hadn't spoken in days. However, Luke didn't mind. He listened carefully to Enid and looked at her big smile. It was a nice feeling. "Damn, I forgot about those two," Yoko said as she hurried up the stairs. Behind her followed Divina, Xavier, and Ajax. "Weirdly, the door is still in condition," commented Ajax. With Luke's telekinesis and his temper, he could have broken the door if he wanted to escape or even picked the lock without breaking it, though he didn't know if Luke could do this. "That's a good sign," said Xavier. They opened the door and stepped onto the balcony. On one wall sitting were Luke and Enid kissing. "Oh, we came at a bad time," said Yoko with a slight smile, and Divina chuckled under her breath. "Looks like our efforts did the trick," commented Xavier with a smile. "Damn, I didn't hear the door open," thought Luke sheepishly, looking at the three people who had just arrived. Enid also looked at them with a blush on her cheeks. "Go on about your business. Luke, buy us something in the cafeteria tomorrow," Ajax said as they walked off the roof with the others. Author's note: Wednesday will appear in chapter 61.